I don't have any nostalgia for the Shenmue series because I never owned a Dreamcast, but I have seen the influence of the game online throughout the years. It fascinated me how Shenmue, a game released at the end of 1999, featured such a detailed open world. The series was considered the most expensive game ever developed at the time, costing roughly $50 to $70 million. The first Shenmue game sold really well, but it couldn't cover the cost of development, though the game did receive critical acclaim, along with a cult following. If you guys are interested in more info, it's pretty fascinating reading about the Dreamcast, Shenmue, and its creator, Yu Suzuki. I'm just glad that both games were ported to PC and consoles, so I could finally try them out. And with that said, I'll start with Shenmue 1. The game begins in 1986, with the protagonist Ryo Hazuki. Upon returning to his family dojo, he witnesses his father fighting a man known as Lan Di. He fails to intervene in the battle, so Lan Di ends up killing his dad and stealing a mysterious mirror from their home. This marks the start of Ryo's journey to avenge his father and discover why the mirror was so important. If you're not familiar with Shenmue, then the story probably sounds like it's going to be an action-packed tale of revenge. The actual game plays more like a life simulator that's focused on exploration. You'll be spending the majority of the game going around the streets of Yokosuka, Japan, asking people around for information, like the day that Ryo's father was murdered. Every time a significant event happens, Ryo will write it down in his notebook. There are no quest markers, so this is the only guide that you'll be carrying with you. This actually intimidated me when I started playing. I got so used to games with maps and logs telling me exactly what to do and where to go, so I got lost a lot in Shenmue. But after hours of playing, the streets started to feel more familiar, since I memorized landmarks and paths that led to each area. It helps that the streets are modeled so well that it really immersed me in that 1980s Japan setting. I don't know how it compares to the Dreamcast version, but I think the graphics look really good on PC. There are textures that look blurry on some models, but I get that completely updating everything from the original game might be a really complicated task. Even after I played this 20-year-old game for the first time, I was still impressed by the mechanics. Like, Ryo has curfew, so while he wakes up the same time every morning, he'll need to go home by 11:30 p.m. Shenmue aims for that kind of realism, along with its day and night cycle, NPC routines, and weather system. You can talk to almost every NPC here. It's pretty impressive how practically everyone is fully voice acted in Shenmue, but the dialogue is limited, so most people you'll be talking to won't have much to say. Apart from a few unique lines every now and then, most of the NPCs either give you directions or tell you that they're too busy to talk. Oh, and the voice acting and dialogue can be really awkward. It made for a lot of unintentionally funny moments, but I feel like it's become part of the game's charm. I've also played a lot of older games with cheesy voice acting that hasn't aged well, so this didn't really bother me. And speaking about the audio, the music for both Shenmue games are so good. The soundtrack really enhances each cutscene, and it's super immersive as you explore the streets. There's a lot of side activities that can fill your time throughout the game. You can play darts and classic Sega arcade games, train fighting moves, buy things at the convenience store, and open cupboards and drawers in your house because you can. All of these little things made Shenmue still feel like a one-of-a-kind game, even after all this time. I've seen the game being compared to Yakuza, and while I do see similarities when it comes to minigames and exploration, Shenmue is a different experience that's less goofy and way more slow-paced. Fights do happen in the game, but only when it's necessary to the story. The battles play like a fighting game where you can pull off different combos. I thought the controls felt janky and slow though, so these fights were my least favorite aspect of the gameplay. But not every encounter led to a battle. Some of them are QTEs. Shenmue is the game that popularized quick time events, so it was interesting to witness how they were implemented in the game. It made me really paranoid though, like I would be reaching for a snack during a cutscene and then a button prompt would suddenly appear on the screen. I think one of the reasons why I liked my time with Shenmue is because I went into it with the right expectations. Like, I was okay with waiting a couple of minutes in real life for certain places to open in the game, but I'm sure this might be a deal breaker for some. There was one thing that tested my patience, and that was when I got to the harbor section. Ryo gets a part-time job where he'll drive a forklift for a few hours. He can't go home immediately too, so you're forced to find clues for his investigation in this big place filled with warehouses and cargo containers. This goes on for a few days in-game, which easily lasts for a couple of hours in real life. I was so invested in the plot before all of that happened, so it was the only time where I felt frustrated by everything slowing down. But I'll admit that the forklifting job got kind of relaxing at times. Overall, I thought Shenmue 1 was a good experience. It's an ambitious game that aims for a level of detail and immersion that is still kinda rare, even now. Though it will be kind of rough to play through if you're used to modern games with better graphics, cutscenes, and controls. But I think it's worth playing if you know what you're getting into, and if you want to experience one of the classics that shaped this genre in gaming. The story was decent too. It felt like I was playing a video game version of an old martial arts film, or at least the beginning of one. The first Shenmue game felt more like a prologue that was setting things up for Shenmue 2, which I will get into now. Shenmue 2's story begins shortly after the end of Shenmue 1, with Ryo arriving in Hong Kong to search for a martial arts master. This was a really interesting start because I could feel the shift in the game's tone, and I think the biggest reason is because Shenmue 2 does a really good job of depicting what it's like to be a stranger in an unfamiliar place. Yokosuka in Shenmue 1 was cozy and homely, while Hong Kong in Shenmue 2 is a big city full of surprises. Some places were real sketchy, while others were bustling tourist destinations filled with people selling watches, antiques, and other goods. The game has larger areas divided by different streets and all kinds of establishments. I already had a terrible sense of direction with Shenmue 1, so it felt really overwhelming here. Thankfully, Shenmue 2 has way more landmarks and signboards. This game also features mini-maps, but they don't appear automatically. You'll need to buy each map in different quarters. You can add map markers, which is nice and all, but I preferred to bother NPCs. One thing I noticed is how the NPCs in Shenmue 2 are so much nicer. If you ask for directions, a lot of them will be happy to explain, and some of them will even go through the trouble of leading you to the place. But I never really follow them all the way because I'm too impatient for that. A lot of times I would just wait for them to turn to the right path, and then I run away. Shenmue 2 has mostly the same gameplay as Shenmue 1, so I already talked about all that earlier in the video. What I will go through is some more differences. In Shenmue 1, you could fast travel to a few places once you stepped out of your dojo. In Shenmue 2, you can fast travel and skip time if you're waiting for a place to open, or if you need to meet up with someone. That made things really convenient when I didn't want to just stand and wait. Unlike the first game, Shenmue 2 has way more action placed throughout the story, so I was in constant fear of QTEs during cutscenes. I enjoyed the combat here more than Shenmue 1 though, because it felt faster. Like I won most battles by dodging, rolling, and attacking. There's also optional fights and tournaments to join, so not every battle is scripted. Ryo gets a daily allowance and eventually a part-time job in Shenmue 1. In Shenmue 2, there's a lot more ways to earn money from other part-time jobs, pawn shops, arm wrestling, and gambling. Though the quickest method is definitely gambling, at least early game. I played Lucky Hit a lot. It's this game where you place your bet and drop a ball on a board filled with pins. If it lands on a red circle, then you win. Later on, I ended up playing this game called Big or Small because it gave more money. You have to bet on a specific spot on the mat and then roll the dice, so the results will determine whether you win. It requires a lot of luck though, so it was a little frustrating. As much as I liked Shenmue 1 for what it is, Shenmue 2's story has better pacing. A lot of stuff happens throughout the game and that made it really entertaining. I enjoyed seeing all of the people that Ryo met and how they played a part in helping him through his journey. Ryo's cool too. Yeah, he's not the most expressive guy ever, but it's no surprise after everything he's been through. By the time I reached the end of the game, I understood why so many people were frustrated for years. It was such a big cliffhanger that left a ton of questions. But yeah, I enjoyed my time with both Shenmue 1 and 2. It took me around 43 hours to beat the two games, though I'm sure that there's a lot of hidden content that I missed out on. Like apparently there was duck racing? I can't believe I didn't see that in my playthrough. As for Shenmue 3, I doubt I'll play that anytime soon. I'm a little intimidated about trying it out because of all the criticism I've seen about the game, particularly with how the gameplay is more tedious than Shenmue 1 and 2, and how nothing much happens in the story. I don't know how much of that is true though, but it's a shame because I was really hoping that there would be more things resolved in the story at least. Maybe Shenmue 4 will pick things up eventually. There's going to be an animated series though. I'm curious how that's going to turn out. Hopefully it'll be a good show. Let me know what you guys thought about the video. I was really hoping to squeeze this video out before New Year, and yeah, that didn't happen. So lots of stuff happened last year. Both good and bad, mostly bad. What matters is we're doing what we can. I hope you guys are doing well, and yeah, let's keep on keeping on. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.